Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual sessions. I'm Rosanna BOM. I'm with FEI Twin Cities. I'm the executive director. We've got a great session planned for you today, so I am going to jump right into it. I'm going to introduce Anita Moulton. Anita is FEI Twin Cities board chair and is also going to be serving as moderator for our session today. So Anita, it's all you.
Great. Thank you very much, Rosanna, and welcome everyone. I want to tell you a little bit of background on this topic. I've been reading so many articles about companies having to pivot and thinking that this session could be an opportunity to help some companies amongst our membership who can take a look at what they're doing, and if the road is looking pretty steep in their existing markets, maybe they want to explore some new markets. So it's kind of the origin of how we got here. I'm really pleased to welcome Shirley Collier, our guest speaker today. She is the president of Scale to Market and host of the Growth Masters Federal Podcast. Shirley's a nationally known speaker, author, a serial technology entrepreneur, and a federal business development consultant. So she's worked in various areas of information technology and innovation management in university, government, and private industries, including starting and growing and selling for technology firms. She's got a lot of background in business development. Her most recent company, Scale to Market, has developed the Entrepreneur's Playbook for early stage companies desiring to prosper in the federal marketplace. So she has a lot of extensive experience that can really be helpful right now in this time of COVID and in our economic crisis. And so I'm really glad to welcome Shirley here today. So what I thought we could do is just go around the room and just a brief introduction of yourself, if you don't mind, to let us know, what you're up to at this point in time and what drew you to our session today. And just for your information, I'm currently with Cargill. This has been an extremely challenging time for Cargill, and every company seems to have its own type of challenges, but I've been very fortunate to watch the mega giant pivot, and it's just amazing. So maybe I'll turn it over to Mary. Would you like to introduce yourself?
As long as I unmute myself, that probably will work. My name is Mary Kurth, and I am semi-retired and into a lot of different things. On the board of a number of organizations. I'm very involved in volunteering. Definitely one of the boards I'm involved in is Cargill's Alumni Board, which is kind of a unique organization from the perspective of we organize events, social events, etc., for people who left Cargill. And it's anybody who's left Cargill. It's not really just people who have retired, but what we have found is that when people leave companies, they want to leave the company, they want to leave the job that they're working on, but they really want to continue to stay connected with people. And consequently, that's what we really allow people to do through service, volunteering, and a variety of social events and educational sessions and so on. A lot of what I have been really involved with since COVID has kind of struck is trying to keep the organizations I'm involved with on the boards above board with respect to how do we deal with what's going on. And then the other piece is it seems like people have more time for volunteer activities, and consequently, I've been really busy trying to just keep up to everybody who's working on the various volunteer grants and et cetera that we're working on. So anyway, that's probably way more than you wanted to hear from me, but I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you. Justin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So I am Rosanna BOM's son-in-law, so she's my wonderful mother-in-law. And so I started my career at Target, like a lot of Minnesota kids. Then launched DoorDash here in Minneapolis and ran and operated that for about 2.5 years. And then most recently, my brothers and I actually acquired a business here in Ramsey, Minnesota. We sell new and recertified analytical laboratory instruments to universities, government agencies, and organizations across the country. And today's topic is certainly pertinent as we just are at the goal line of getting our GSA contract awarded. So yeah, it's about 24 employees, and owned it for about 3 years, and it's been a fun entrepreneurial ride so far.
Awesome, thank you. Jill, how about you?
I'll unmute first. Hello, everyone. I guess my potential interest and connection to this topic is I do have a couple of current clients. I'm currently doing finance-related consulting. I do have a couple of clients that either their entire set of revenue or a significant share of their revenue is from contracts with companies that have, defense contracts or other contracts with other agencies in the U.S. government. And at least one of those clients is actually experiencing a fairly significant revenue decline as a result of the government reducing its purchases during this COVID spell. So I guess that's my interest, as well as having some history with significant interaction with government contracts.
Okay, thank you. And Rob, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. Rob Wolf, CFO at a company by the name of NXC Imaging. We sell and service medical imaging equipment. We do sell to the government, and one of the reasons that I wanted to join this call was we, about 2 years ago, began selling a software as a service product. And Jill, you appreciate this. It actually replaces Ramage systems, which are CD, DVD, Blu-ray burning systems in hospitals. So for patients who go in and get a diagnosis and want a second opinion, this software as a service allows that record basically to transfer to that next facility, not on the cloud, but it's basically server to server, so point to point, and replaces the need to have to get that disc in hand and take it to the next spot, which with COVID-19, it's good timing. So we're seeing a kind of an uptick in interest in the product, and in particular in the Veterans Affairs area. So the VA hospitals, we're really focused on seeing what we can do to help them now that they are able to refer patients outside of the system. So just wanted to hear anything, any kind of advice or any insights into working with the VA and some maybe nuggets I can take away.
Excellent.
Awesome, thank you. And Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm being shy here. I'll get the camera working. Let's see.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm going to be shy though because I work with Redpath and Company CPAs, and I've got several clients that do federal contracting, both nonprofit, for-profit, and thought I would have my lunch here while listening in, which is why I'm not going to have the camera on while I eat away, and hopefully I can pick up some nuggets as well. I also was a Target employee. Not my first job, but one of my first.
Okay, thank you. And no problem eating lunch. This is a lunch and learn.
Exactly.
Okay. And then Nancy.
And hopefully you can hear me because people are coming in and out. So maybe it's my connection that's unstable. And I do have a puppy running on my feet, so that's why. Otherwise, you're going to see me zooming back and forth into the picture. But I hung up my permanent CFO hat in 2014, and I've been serving as an interim CFO or interim controller and what have you for the past 5 or 6 years. A lot of those roles have been nonprofits where we've had both federal and state grants. And working through the compliance and management of that, along with single audits and what have you. But what I'm looking at today is that oftentimes I can see where there's needs for subject matter experts, and I'm looking to see how one, as an independent contractor, can get into that space.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so remember, if you have any questions, please chat. If you have a private question, just send it to me only. There's an option to do that when you drop down the box. And I'm very happy at this point to turn our program over to Shirley.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Shirley.
And I'm going to try to share my screen here.
That's that. I just want to mention too, feel free to change the view of your screen. So there's a gallery view. So up in your upper right-hand corner, there's speaker view or gallery view. So pick whatever is best for you. And then Shirley is sharing her screen. There's a little bar about 2/3 of the way over to the right. If you grab that and move it to the left, it changes the size of the presentation and how many people are on the screen. So your view is your own. So, find something that works for you. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here today. I hope to give you those nuggets of knowledge from my 25 years in federal contracting. Roseanne, I don't think it's necessary to do the poll. We were going to poll you about your experience with government contracting, but I think in the introductions, I got a good sense of that. Now, I have a handout and a copy of the slides that I make available to the attendees. And if we were in person, I would say, leave me your business card and I'll be glad to send this to you. But since we're not in person, the way to get the handout, which is a checklist of how to evaluate upcoming federal opportunities, plus a copy of the slides, send a chat to Roseanne. So Roseanne is going to be collecting those. Just say, I'm interested in the handout, and then that will give her permission to give me your email address, and then I'll give that to you. And do chat with Anita on any questions that you might have, and we'll answer those as we go along. So since we have a small group, we want to make this informal and interactive. So don't hesitate to ask a question. And if I'm not paying attention to the chat box, Anita, feel free to interrupt me. I will not be offended.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so let's start here. Can get this, there we go. There's me. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the good, bad, and the ugly part of federal contracting, how the pandemic has changed procurement practices in the last couple of months, common mistakes that companies make when they try to pursue federal contracting, and hopefully some proven strategies. So we're going to start with the bad and the ugly, which are the challenges. The very first is that it takes a long time to get a federal contract. You should expect that it will take about 2 years to get a prime contract. The government starts telegraphing about 2 years in advance for large procurement. So any procurement that's over about 4 million, they will start up to 2 years prior to the actual procurement doing market research. So not only is the government cycle very long, but the time that it takes for you to actually approach the government and sell to them, get through is also long. So the federal government is required. This is really important to tune into if you want to approach the federal government, is that Any procurement over $3,000, they have to conduct market research on. There's some exceptions to that. If there's a sole source contract for a small business, for example, that does not have to be competitively bid. Or if the product or service that you offer is a commercial item. So I'm going to be referring to regulations called the Federal Acquisition Regulations, FAR. Commercial items is part 12. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about the FAR as we go along. And again, you can get a copy of these slides. It's going to have a lot of this kind of explained. I don't expect you to remember all this, but it is important to tune into some of the regulations. There's a misunderstanding regarding commercial items. The misunderstanding really is with the contracting offices. Sometimes they think that a commercial item has to be a product, but in fact, a commercial item can be either a product or a service. So what has been happening over the last 5 to 10 years in contracting offices is that baby boomers, like me, have begun to retire. They were the contracting officers in these federal agencies. As they have begun to retire, there's been a brain drain away from contracting offices. Those individuals have been replaced by younger, more technology savvy, ethnically diverse people. So the old boy network has kind of been disrupted, but that actually is a good thing. So it's a lot easier now to get in and to sell innovation into these federal agencies. So do plan, however, on it taking 2 years to get your first prime contract, but you can usually jump on a team as a subcontractor and get work that way much quicker. Okay, the next challenge is that buyers in the federal government are risk averse. So what that means is that if you're the incumbent, it's good news. So incumbents win 60 to 80% of recompetes of their contracts. The conundrum that we as government contractors have is that the federal government is constantly telegraphing, they're constantly requesting innovation, yet what they're looking for is innovation that's proven, which is an oxymoron. So they're looking for past performance, but they're also looking for innovative ideas. And you can use commercial past performance to win a government contract. That's also a misunderstanding that some people have. So the government agencies are looking for past performance, but you can use your personal experience if you worked for someone and you're selling an expertise, or if your company has past performance in the commercial marketplace, you can use that. So because they are risk averse, it really is hard to get their attention. But once you do get their attention, there are definitely some steps that you can take so that you make it easier on them to contract with you. So doing business in the federal marketplace is unlike the commercial marketplace. In the commercial marketplace, you have a common language. It's called profits. In the federal marketplace, not so much. Each agency has a mission. And then the other problem that you have to deal with, and depending upon your perspective may not be a problem, it's an opportunity, and that is that federal agencies have a social agenda. 23% of all federal procurements, discretionary funding, has to go to small businesses. And of that 23%, certain percentages have to go to socioeconomically certified, socioeconomically disadvantaged certified companies. So there are, the subsets are women-owned small businesses, 8As, service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, and hub-zone companies. And hub-zone companies are in socioeconomically disadvantaged regions of the country. So regarding whether or not you're a small business, you may find this surprising. Typically, in most NAICS codes, the size standard for small is up to about 30 million in annual revenue, which is still a pretty good sized company. However, in some NAICS codes, they don't use the revenue as the size indicator. They use number of employees. And for some NAICS codes, you can have up to 1,000 employees and still be considered small. So you can take advantage of the small business set-aside program, even though you have 1,000 employees. An example of that is the NAICS code 541713, which is, what is that, biotechnology research. And in that case, you can have up to 1,000 employees and still be considered small. So the objective of this social agenda is to help small businesses get contracts, grow, but ultimately to graduate and to be productive and competitive in the full and open market. Now, the reason that large companies should tune into this social agenda is that this creates a fertile acquisition pool from which they can acquire companies and gain access into certain agencies. So that's what we have seen, is that small businesses may have either relationships that larger companies can exploit, past performance, innovation. That one way that a large company can gain a foothold in an agency where they do not have a presence is to actually buy a small company that does have past performance. The other program that is very beneficial to both large companies and small companies is the Mentor Protege Joint Venture. Now, this is a relatively new program. It came out, I think, 3 years ago, and it's called the All Small Mentor Protege JV, which allows large companies to mentor small companies, especially those that have socioeconomic certifications. Let's say, for example, a hub zone company, and under the Mentor Protege JV, they can, as a joint venture, go after a contract that is a hub zone set-aside contract, and the large company can perform 60% of that contract. And we've seen some set-aside contracts for small businesses, for hub zones, in fact, that are $100 million contracts. And the large company is able to perform 60% of that. So that kind of sweetens the pot for large companies to reach out to small companies, to form relationships, to mentor them. There's a financial advantage short-term and a potential strategic long-term advantage. Okay, so the other challenge is that it's a highly regulated marketplace. So I mentioned FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations. It has 53 parts, 8 subchapters. Each part is divided into subparts, sections, and subsections. And then there's further divisions below the subsection level. So it's rather onerous. I don't want to discourage you, however. But it's a known entity. It is documented, so you know what the rules are. But to make it even a little more complicated, the Department of Defense has its own Federal Acquisition Regulations, and that's called DFARS. If you want to do business with the Department of Defense, you should definitely get familiar with DFAR, or hire somebody who is familiar with the DFAR. These regulations govern pre-acquisition communications between the government and the vendor community. It covers market research, how market research is conducted, solicitations, contracting, performance on that contract, and contract closeout. So it's the whole cycle of selling to the government, responding to RFIs, or RFPs, all the way through winning the contract, performing the contract, and then the closeout. Some people misunderstand what can happen in the pre-solicitation phase. This is something I talk to my clients about quite frequently. There's a myth that government decision makers are prohibited from talking one-on-one with vendors prior to a solicitation coming out. Not only is that incorrect, the FAR actually encourages communications with industry prior to the solicitation, so before the RFP. And we call it shaping an opportunity. So there are ways to ethically and legally influence upcoming procurements by talking to people, decision makers in the federal government, and understanding how to do that is the key to success in federal procurement. Okay, so we've talked about the ugly, the bad and the ugly. So why would people go through all of this to do business with the federal government? Well, it's because there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The market is huge. It's $500 billion. The contracts are large, they're multi-year, and the government pays very promptly. That's also a misnomer, that the government is very slow to pay. There are actually laws now that enforce payment 30 days or sooner, and in some cases, the government will actually pay you up front at the beginning of the contract. The government pays for your direct expenses, for your overhead, and your profit, so you are allowed to make a profit by doing business with the federal government. Okay, are there any questions so far before we get into some of these changes? Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the changes in the procurement practices since COVID-19. The Office of Management and Budget issued a memo on March 20th that said, among other things, we want you to do everything in your power. So OMB, just to clarify, OMB is at the White House level, and they sent a memo internally to all federal agencies. So this is an internal government memo. It directed agencies to not cancel contracts with contractors. Basically, they said, we don't want them on unemployment. So do everything that you can to keep those contracts going. So there was a scramble the last 2 weeks of March to get everybody working from home. It was pretty normal operating procedure to work from home periodically, but they, like everybody else in the country, had to flip a switch and everybody had to work from home simultaneously. The Stafford Act describes the procurement authority that federal agencies have when a president declares a national emergency. So under the Stafford Act, once the president declared a national emergency, OMB came out with some new regulations regarding rapid procurement, and this has been a game changer over the last couple of months, especially for small companies and for organizations that have not previously done business with the federal government. There's 3 aspects that have been changed for the simplified acquisition procedure and the simplified acquisition threshold. And I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. But there is a micro threshold that the limit on that, the threshold on that went from $10,000 to $20,000. What that means is that a federal buyer can essentially put $20,000 on a credit card. No additional signature is required. The next level up from that is simplified acquisition, which the limit on that was $250,000. That is now $750,000. Requires 1 signature. And this is for any company. You don't have to be a small business. You don't have to be socioeconomically certified. Any business that has a value proposition that wants to do business with the federal government, simplified acquisition threshold is now $750,000. But the most exciting, from my perspective, is that the commercial items limit went from 7 million to 13 million. Simultaneously with OMB issuing their memo, DCAA, which is the Defense Contract Audit Agency, made a determination, that's capital D, that all products and services related to COVID-19 would be automatically deemed commercial. So it used to be that you had to defend the fact that you had a commercial item or service, product or service. With this declaration, with this determination, anything related to the COVID-19, including the response, the stimulus, is considered a commercial item. That means that a federal buyer can issue a direct purchase order, sole source, non-competitive, up to $13 million. And we're seeing that happen. We've seen that happen over the last couple of months. So you might be asking, what is the government buying right now? How has it changed? Under COVID-19, it's manufacturing, loan processing, financial services of various sorts, retrofitting construction, and the telehealth infrastructure, primarily in the VA. I've really pressed on the accelerator there. They were working on several telehealth projects. Those have gotten higher priority. But virtually all federal agencies have a role to play in fighting COVID and responding to the economic catastrophe that has happened as a consequence. So Health and Human Services, that's obvious with CDC and NIH. They ramped up their spending. But we've also seen, however, State Department, USDA, FEMA is natural, and Veterans Administration, but also Labor, Treasury, HUD, and the SBA. So I wanted to emphasize here what the government is buying. So in addition to all those things that I just mentioned, they're also buying across the board administrative, technical, and professional services, which includes call centers, marketing support, media management, management consulting, accounting, legal, web development, project management, program management, all areas of IT and all areas of cybersecurity. We've seen increased spending. I have a client that is a small business. In January, they won a contract with the SBA. They had been working there as a subcontractor, and they had applied, submitted a proposal to be a prime on the contract that they had had for several years as a subcontractor. Really big deal for them. 10-person company. They won a $20 million contract over 5 years in January. In March, in mid-March, the contracting office at the SBA sent the owner, sent the CEO a email and said, give us your capability statement by close of business today, because we have some additional requirements. So she did, she scrambled, she sent their capability statement over. They added 15 more slots to her contract. So that's a good outcome. Okay, now let's talk about some of the common mistakes that companies make when they enter the federal marketplace. The first one is that there's an assumption that it's a level playing field, right? This is public money, it's a competitive bidding process, there's a blind evaluation of proposals. Well, that's not true. Going back to my statement earlier that they are risk averse. They are not going to risk their jobs, their reputation, their career on an unknown entity, an unknown vendor. So you really have to understand that people are people. They like to do business with people that they know, that they like, and that they trust. So you have to sell. You have to sell to the federal government. You can't just respond to public postings of opportunities. In fact, your chances of winning a public posting is about 10%. And that's kind of hard to hear. And if you go to the PTACs or the SBDCs, some of the government-sponsored free services, what they tell you how to get started in the federal government, they'll tell you, oh, no problem. Just go out to FBO and you'll see all these opportunities out there and make sure that your proposal looks like this. And they really do not do businesses a good service by telling them that, because you can spend an extraordinary amount of money. I've seen companies spend $150,000 to $500,000 trying to get a contract the wrong way. and spending that money with no return on investment. So that's the first common mistake. The next is not really understanding contract vehicles. So the way the government works is there's a movement towards what they call category management. These are multi-award, multi-year contract vehicles, large contract vehicles that you propose to get on that contract vehicle as a prime. Then task orders are issued under that contract vehicle, and only the companies that have prime positions on that contract vehicle even see the solicitation, the task order solicitation. And so you're competing in a smaller pool. So it's very important that you understand and get on a contract vehicle, one of which is GSA, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But one of the first questions that you'll be asked if you're approaching a federal agency in the contracting office or the small business office, they will say, what contracts are you on? So you want to be able to say, I have a GSA contract. However, only about 8% of federal spending goes through GSA schedules. A lot of people find that to be surprising as well, because it seems like what the advice that you get is get on a GSA schedule, and it only represents 8%. Why would I want to get on it? Well, you get on it because you're going to be asked that question, what vehicle are you on? And it is a quick, easy way, if you find an agency that is in fact interested in your product or service, it's a very quick and easy way for them to contract with you. Now, they may have to competitively bid it. They can throw it out on eBuy. eBuy is the GSA portal. They can throw it out there for competitive bids, but they can limit the amount of time that people have to respond to that solicitation. So you've been in there talking to them for months. They have to do a competitive bid. They throw it out on eBuy and say you have 3 days to respond. It limits competition. And that's one of the things that I've learned. If a federal agency wants to give you a contract, they'll find a way to give you that contract. But you have to be savvy also about the FAR and about contracting vehicles and work with the contracting office. All ethical, all legal, but you do have to be aware of how the government operates. So there was a question that came in regarding GSA schedules, and I hope that I've answered that. So the GSA schedule is to be used as a tool to help the buyer of your products or services. It's not to be used for you to respond to ad hoc solicitations. Okay, one of the other common mistakes that people make is not understanding and not leveraging data. Now this little image here, the spreadsheet, is purposefully tiny and obscured because that's what the data looks like. Any procurement over $3,000 has to be posted on FPDS. That's the Federal Procurement Data System. So there's an enormous amount of information out there about buying patterns. But you have to find it, and you have to search through the databases and draw conclusions. And it's not all in one place, although FPDS does have some information regarding the past. It doesn't have information about the future. So where you go for that is every federal agency is required, although not all of them comply, they are required by law to post their procurement forecasts. So between November and February of every year, these procurement forecasts, which is basically what's been approved in their budget, that was approved by Congress and signed by the president, they have to post that on a GSA website. And for those of you that might be interested in that, just let Roseanne know that you're interested, and I'll send you a link to that website. But it's acquisitiongateway.gov/procurement forecast. The reason that you want to look at that is that it's before any solicitations come out. It's a good way to start a conversation with a federal agency. Okay, let me get this next one. So the next common mistake that a lot of people have is a lack of understanding of the role of the contracting office. Some people think contracting office, they're just paper pushers, and why do I need to go to the contracting office? Aren't they like after the fact? But in the federal government, contracting offices are the buyers. So they are the ones seeking innovation. They are the ones seeking new vendors, and they are the go-between between the public, the vendor community, and the programs. So the program is the internal customer of the contracting office. So you definitely need to understand how to get in touch with and how to speak to the contracting offices. The next mistake is being a lone wolf. So the name of the game in federal contracting is definitely teaming. Agencies love when large companies team with small companies because they think they're getting the best of both worlds. They're getting the stability of a large company and they're getting the innovation from a small company. So you will see quite frequently in solicitations that there is a preference for teams. So understanding how to team and being savvy about teaming is definitely one of the keys to success. So success in the commercial marketplace does not equate to success in government contracting. Everything is different about it. Selling, fulfilling contracts, the audit, contract management, everything is different about federal contracting, about selling and performing in the government space. So what some companies do is they'll have separate sales teams. They'll have separate divisions that do federal contracting, and in some cases, they'll even set up separate companies. So now let's talk about some of the proven strategies. One of the first things is to perform market research. I mentioned that before. It's so critical. That's one of the advantages you have of doing business in the public arena is that the data is public. In the commercial sector, you have to kind of dig, and you're not going to find so much about buying patterns of companies in the commercial sector. It's all there. There are companies called data aggregators that pull information from a number of sources, and they are invaluable. It's definitely a recommendation that I would have that if you are planning to do business in the federal government, subscribe to one of these services. You may have heard of GovWin, EasyGovOps, GovTribe. Those are just some of the names of the companies that do that data aggregation, and it definitely will save you an extraordinary amount of time. They may seem to be a little expensive, but trying to pull all that data together and make sense out of it is hard, and they will save you a lot of time and effort. So the second proven strategy is to have a plan. I normally recommend that you devise a plan 18 months to 2 years out. That plan should include your target agencies. It should include an understanding of those agencies, so their culture, their budget, their requirements. You will find that the Department of Defense has a different culture than the civilian agencies. So tuning into that, the things that they find important is definitely a key to success in doing business with the Department of Defense. So that should be part of your plan. Your plan should also include very specific opportunities, upcoming programs, and a lot of that can be, I have some clients that actually monitor Congress, the budgets that are going through Congress. This is all public information too. Once Congress approves, especially major programs, then they know to get out in front of that and to contact those agencies and begin developing a relationship and selling ideas and innovations to them. So you want to tune into the programs. You want to tune into contracts that are coming up for recompete. Most federal contracts are 3 to 5 years. And then they're recompeted. You want to look for opportunities that are in the market research phase. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier. RFIs, requests for information. They'll also do sources sought notifications, and they'll put out draft RFPs. You want to tune into that in your plan, understand the incumbents in those existing programs and existing contracts, and teaming partners. That should all be part of your opportunity area of your plan. The specific contract vehicles that I mentioned earlier about GSA, but there are also a number of other huge contract vehicles that are used by specific agencies. So you've got to understand how, if you're going to target a specific agency, what their contract vehicles are. And the most important part of your plan is the strategies. What are the actions? So you pull together all this data. Now, how do you analyze it, and what are the next steps? Do you want to prime this opportunity? Do you want to subcontract this opportunity? Do you want to form a JV? There are many paths to success. And the last part of your plan should be your differentiators. And I think there was someone who sent in a question also yesterday about how do I distinguish my company now that I have a GSA schedule? And that's the $64 million question. You definitely need to differentiate yourself. And the way you do that is determine how the agency is solving the problem that you purport to solve. How are they solving it now? And how is your solution better? So that should be in your plan. And the last topic here in terms of proven strategies is to invest in growth. And I know that some of you have financial and accounting backgrounds, probably been waiting for this part of the presentation. So I can't tell you exactly how much you should invest in the federal marketplace, but what I can tell you is the topics that you will need to address in your budget. So the first is the thinking, the planning, the organizing, the research that I mentioned. The business development staff that will be executing your plan. It's not only the salespeople, but you will probably have to invest in a market intelligence analyst. And if you're in a technical company, in technical sales support. So that should be in your budget. Marketing and social media. It's also a fallacy that the federal government doesn't use social media. They definitely use social media. You should have a tab on your website that says federal government and some very specific things that they look at. You have 6 seconds to grab their attention. So you want to modify your website. Information systems, I mentioned about the data aggregators. Definitely want to do that. You also want to invest in a CRM that is customized for the federal marketplace. There are some unique aspects of teaming, contracting that you will need to track during the CRM process or during the sales process that should be in your CRM. Travel and conferences, once COVID is over, we hopefully will get back to that. That has always been a very popular thing to do in federal contracting, networking and meeting people. It's all being done virtually right now, but you'll want to put that in your budget. Proposal support. A proposal in the federal marketplace takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months to develop a proposal. It's a lot of effort. Some companies outsource that because it is an art form, but that will need to be in your budget as well. Audit and accounting, of course, you will be audited if you have a federal contract, unless it's a firm fixed price contract. The accounting is very different. The job costing is very different. So you'll want to budget for that. There are some human resource aspects, recruiting aspects, especially if you're recruiting for cleared personnel, but there are also some regulations that only apply to federal contractors, so you'll want to account for that. Contract management can be a bear, so you definitely want to budget for that. And then last but not least is legal services. If you're in government contracting for any period of time, you will probably protest a procurement at some point, but you also need really good legal advice to enforce or to contest contractual provisions of your contract. Okay, so that's it. I hope I didn't overwhelm you. There are 500,000 companies that do business with the federal government. The federal government pays on time. There are large contracts, multi-year contracts. That's why you want to do business with the federal government. But there are some companies that do business with the federal government, because they want to serve the American people. They are, it's civic pride, which I found very surprising when I first got into government contracting, but there are companies out there that do it because they want to serve the American people. Okay, that is it. I think we only have a few minutes, but are there any questions?
Thank you, Shirley. That was fabulous. I have one question.
Okay.
The March 20th OMB memo, does that have an expiration date on it, or is it just going to be open for a while, or
Till further notice.
till further notice? Okay.
Until further notice. So yeah, OMB said, you know, until we get back to normal, whatever that is, these are the new limits on the procurement thresholds.
Okay, very good. All right, does anyone else have any other questions? No?
Sure. So when one of the questions I had was around the VA hospitals. Do you have any advice for getting, you know, we're making great headway into certain, I guess they're called VISNs within the VA. But, you know, our goal obviously is to try to get into every VISN within the country. Do you have any advice as to how to best to approach that? You know, we have a one doctor who is very, very excited about what the product that we have and is really itching to go, but you know, there's how many, 18 different VISNs and he's one VISN. So do you have any advice on how to maybe short circuiting that process a little bit?
Well, so the doctor may be in the program area of the VA that would be your ultimate customer, but as I mentioned, the buyer is really in the contracting office.
Got it.
Okay, so that's what you need to do, is to find out what contracting office that doctor works with for his or her procurements.
Okay.
I would also suggest, I'm assuming you're a small business?
Not, maybe. I have to, I'm not sure about the code, you know, if it's employees or revenue. Revenue, no, but employees, maybe.
Okay. If you are still considered a small business, leverage the small business office just to kind of understand the lay of the land and people and those sorts of things. I want to caution you about the small business office. They have absolutely no authority.
Okay.
None. Okay. So you don't want to spend a whole lot of time there. And most of them are very, very reluctant to make introductions. It's very frustrating, but every now and then you'll run into someone that is at the top of their game and will help you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Shirley, for joining us today. And
You're very welcome.
We'll turn it back to you.
Ah, that darn mute button. Justin, final question?
I had one quick question. Just I've heard just horror stories of people getting burned by picking the wrong partners when kind of diving into getting help with just navigating the GSA in general. Do you have any advice on how to find the right partner and what to look for?
When you say partner, are you saying teaming partner or a consultant that can help you with GSA?
Yeah, more consultant, like helping us navigate bids, helping us manage the catalog and all that fun stuff.
So there are consultants that specialize in just GSA schedules. And I can definitely recommend a company that can do that for you.
That'd be great.
Okay.
All right, well, we're to the top of the hour here, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So Shirley, thank you so much for being here. And just to let everybody know, you will get a recording of this and also Shirley's contact information. If you've requested the slides, Shirley will be getting those as well. So feel free to follow up with any questions on that.
And the handout. And the handout if you're interested.
In the handout,
in
the checklist, that's right. Yep. So great. Well, thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you again. I have one more thing I want to just share. So we do have an upcoming events. Our next one is tomorrow and at 9 a.m. And it is Resiliency and Recession Response Strategies. This is part 2. Our first session was very, very popular, and they wanted to do another session to answer any questions. So if that looks interesting, please feel free to get registered for that. And then you'll see the rest of them there as well. So I encourage you to join on those. Those can be at feitwincities.com. Click into events and you can register. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice meeting all of you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Okay.
See ya.